Hello, my friends. Thanks for joining in. We are Friday, 20th of October, and I hope everybody is doing well. Lots of things happening in the world. I'd like to cover geopolitics in general, especially what is happening in Gaza, and also I'll touch the Belt and Road Initiative. Uh, Keep on sending comments. I will actually answer to your question at the end of the show. I just received 3 coffees from Arlen Everest. Thank you, Arlen. It's always appreciated to have support. I wanted to start with something that I've been thinking about these days. It's been extremely difficult for me because I'm a supporter of the Palestinian cause. And then you have the Hamas. The Hamas, what they did was quite shocking. And but then I saw a video of Norman Finkelstein. Finkelstein is someone that has been working, sacrificing his life for the Palestinian cause, and he's been through the same struggle. There's a moral question by supporting Hamas and what they did, and it's difficult to justify the action. They actually kill civilians. They were aiming mainly at IDF soldiers, but they killed civilians, settlers. Well, keep in mind that many settlers are armed, but still, there were collateral damages, and it's any civilian dying, we have to condemn that. So Norman Finkelstein he actually makes a comparison of the abolitionist slaves, the one that actually want to abolish slavery in the US, and they had to break through their own prison. And so that was my struggle. And I think we don't have all the answers. I think it's a moral question. Everybody has to ask that moral question. Is it right? Is it right to go through that? Can we understand that? Can we justify it? And through this whole process, I come to the same conclusion as Norman Finkelstein. Just put yourself into the shoes of Palestinians, what you're going through. It's war. Keep in mind that people like Nelson Mandela, they were depicted as a terrorist. They did actually terrorist acts just in order to, and kill civilians too, in order to end the apartheid state in South Africa. So imagine you go through that. You were born in a prison. You have walls around you. You even have actually you settlers, you people that put you in jail that are responsible, because there's a responsibility also about not only who's putting you in jail, but the people that are actually staying passive. They actually stole your land too. And then on the other side of the wall, they are partying. There's a rave party. That's how humiliating it is. So you were born in a prison with very limited rights. You are the starving level. Basically, what Israel did was to make sure that you had a certain amount of calorie. Basically, you was just at the level of above starvation. That was the purpose. This is a way to tame people. You see, you put them in prison, but you tame them. At the end, you need to be begging. Oh, can I go to work to Israel? I'll be working in one of your kitchen, and I'll go through the checkpoints, and you will humiliate me, and you'll give me nothing. I'll be slave labor, but then I still have to say thank you. That's what taming is. It's like a dog, not treating people like decent human being, but like dogs. That's all your life. 50% of people don't have work. Most of young people have no prospect. You cannot get in, Gaza, you cannot get out of Gaza. This is what is going to be like in your whole life: humiliation, and then you have random killing. The killings of civilians have been happening since 1948. And believe me, most Israeli settlers that kill Palestinians never go to jail. Actually, they might end up becoming politicians. So imagine they killed your brother. You've been humiliating all your life. And then you have one opportunity to break out of the prison. So now I am changing my stance. I do understand. I do understand. I cannot support because it's illegal, I don't want to get in trouble. But I do understand. You break out from a prison, you've been humiliated. And again, Hamas did it, but if there's no Hamas, who would do it? Let's take Hamas out of the question. Who would do it? Do you think Abbas, this corrupt person that lives in Cisjordania, is going to do anything? There's also one thing which is really important to understand, is that Israel, it's a good thing. It's been making peace with the Arab world, but that is at the expenses of the Palestinian question. Because I haven't thought about this, but now you have Israel making peace with all those Arab states. That means that the Palestinian question is not going to be solved. It's actually going to get worse. What is happening now, it's just a long-term plan, just to eradicate completely Palestine from Israel. They want to flatten down Gaza. They wish that all the Palestinians would move to either Jordania or to Egypt. That would be done. And then you have Cisjordania, that you actually taking bits by bits land. But just think about bit by bit lands. That means you have a house that you have for generations. You have settlers that actually bully you. They cut your trees. They shoot at your house. Then one day they come at your house and they say, you have to leave. It's either this or I kill your whole family. And they do it bit by bit. They legalize that. They have legalized theft. They have legalized killing. In addition to that, it's a project of Greater Israel. Greater Israel would be from the Nile to the Euphrates. And so they would have to grab land from Saudi Arabia, Jordania, Syria, Lebanon. What is next? Lebanon. Lebanon is next. You have the staff of the embassy that left. You have actually many Arab states that said you'd better leave Lebanon. So probably Lebanon might be next. And then there is Iran. My biggest fear right now is that Israel, they could potentially use a tactical nuclear bomb. In their doctrine, they give themselves the right to use a nuclear bomb if it's for existential purpose. And I think those guys are so mad, so nuts, they might do it. And also, what happens is that you have the collective West, all the Western countries, not the people. I think that people are wiser, but the leaders that are working for the globalist elites, they are backing Israel. We are living a unique time, where you have a live Holocaust, a live genocide happening, and we are doing nothing. Nothing. So that's part of the discussion I wanted to have today. There's another thing that is happening right now, actually, while the West is actually doing destruction, because what is happening is destruction. Ukraine using, it's a NATO that is actually destroying Ukraine, fighting to the last Ukrainian against Russia. Then you have Israel, pure destruction. Then you have China. In China, you have 140 countries that actually are gathering together for a project that has 10 years since its start. The idea of the Belt and Road Initiative was an initiation by LaRouche. Linson LaRouche was a very wise person. And I think somehow at some point, the Chinese, they were very inspired by this idea of a huge infrastructure project. But this is something not only for China, it's the dimension of this project has an impact on the future of humanity. It's the largest ever infrastructure project in human history. So what is it? It's let me say I have a map here. I'm going to show you the map. So that is the project of Belt and Road Initiative. So you see here, this idea is about integration. You have what we call Eurasia. The idea of this project started with Eurasia, how we can integrate all those economies. You see, you can be prosperous if you have access to the sea, because trade is done, 90% of the trade is done via the sea. But then you have many countries that are landlocked. So you see, when you look at Kazakhstan, well, Kazakhstan, you are landlocked. What do? You don't have access to the sea. You are very limited when it comes to exporting and importing goods. So you need to build up infrastructure, inland infrastructure. There is two. In this project, Belt and Road Initiative, there's overland routes, so inland, and maritime routes, because there's still a lot of room for improvement of the maritime routes. So the first idea is for China, how to integrate all those economies. When you have a road, actually Chinese, they say, if you want to become rich, you need to start building a road. It's very wise. If you are, let's say you are a small village in the middle of nowhere, well, what do you do? There's no road. You need to build up a road. You build up a road, then you have the lead time. You need to do business to the city. Well, then it's much faster. And then you have people that come to you, that can come to your place. Let's say you have goods. You have minerals. You have minerals in your village, but even if you extract your minerals, you have no road to export that. How do you do? You build up infrastructure. So integration of those economies, you have the lead time, which is much faster. Now you want to export from Kazakhstan to Europe, it's going to be 2 days. Efficiency. The world becomes smaller. You have those economies, then they have natural resources, then they have roads to export. For China, it's a way to export their extra capacity, but also to import what they need in terms of natural resources. So it's a win-win. There's also one thing for China, which is really important, China doesn't have a power projection force, maritime power projection force, meaning that China can defend itself on the sea, but only close to the shore of China. So imagine if there was a blockade, the same as the US did to Japan in World War II. They did a blockade. And the idea was to asphyxiate Japan's economy. Well, they could do the same for China. And so in this project, I will show you one of the projects within the Belt and Road Initiative is the Kra Canal. The Kra Canal is a canal that actually cuts uh, Thailand in two. Let's see if I have that. Let me see. There you go. So here we have the Crack Canal, you see? You have, I will show you here, right here. This is the Malacca Strait. And the US, if you look at the Rand Corporation papers, how to contain China, the US has a plan to blockade this Crack Canal, this Malacca Strait. One way for China to bypass would be to have a canal to be done together with Thailand to bypass the Malacca Strait. So this way, in terms of national security, you actually you secure the fact that you could not be stopped. I mean, you could not have a blockade on the export and import of your goods. And also here, it's about efficiency. You don't have to go around all the way around Singapore. You gain in terms of efficiency, in terms of fuel, in terms of cost. We are talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. So it's not only for China, this is for the whole region. Everybody is a beneficiary. People tend to say, well, it's for China, it's for China. It's not. Again, whoever is doing, it's the whole region that is actually taking advantage of this project. Other aspect of the Belt and Road Initiative, China has a next trade surplus. So what is a trade surplus? A trade surplus when it comes to, well, US dollar, because let's assume that everything is done in US dollar. Most of the trade is done in US dollar, even though they're starting to shift into other currencies. But because China sells more than what it buys, China has an extra trade surplus in US dollar. So every month, China has billions and billions of accumulation of US dollars. And it needs to do something with its US dollar. So up to now, up to recently, up to 5-10 years ago, China was reinvesting its US trade surplus into buying US bonds. But when you do that, you are financing the US economy, financing the US debt. And the way the US is working, it is like a Ponzi scheme. The US repays its debt by making new debts. So the Ponzi scheme stops the day that you don't have anyone buy new debts. So China, within a very short period, has decreased its US bond holding from 1.2 trillion to now $800 billion. So now slowly they are dumping the US bonds. And not only China, but many other countries. Meaning that now, because the US has a deficit, budget deficit, now the US is actually not, it cannot actually issue new debt. Or it can, but it will be bought by US banks. But now mainly the US is actually printing money. And when you print money, you create inflation. And because many countries are actually starting to trade in other currencies, now it's going to become a huge problem. So they're increasing interest rates, making US bonds more attractive. But the problem is that you increase the interest rates is going to be painful for your economy. Now, the mortgage rate is going to go higher. If you have a house, well, it's going to be more expensive for you to afford to keep that house. So security, there is exporting capacity, there's importing goods from those countries, and also recycling US dollar trade surplus. So that's about what is happening here. So this is a huge project. You guys, I wanted to touch also about a lot of people hear about the US, the debt trap of the Belt and Road Initiative. It is important to understand this is for those countries in the global south. It doesn't need to be in Eurasia, actually, even South America. This is a global project. Let's say Argentina, you have a project, you go to China, and you expose your project. China looks at your project and sees if it is viable. Are you going to lose money on that project? Well, if you're going to lose money, China is not going to invest into that project. It's not going to help you doing that whole project of infrastructure. It needs to be viable. Then, if it goes through this whole process of due diligence, then China might lend you the money. But it's important to know that this lending is over a long period, and also the interest rate is probably about half what the IMF and the World Bank is lending. So very beneficial. This is why a lot of countries are going to China, because it's those are very good conditions. And also very important, it's not conditional. You see, the IMF and the World Bank, whenever they lend you money, there are preconditions. And those conditions go against your country's sovereignty. They say, I am going to lend you money, but you will need to actually accept LGBT, ideology. You'll need to, accept some NGOs which are going to interfere into your elections, are going to influence your elections. We are going to put conditions on the environment. You see, very often you need to be very careful. They come in and they say, well, environment, you need to, you can do those projects, but it's got to be environmental friendly. But that ultimately that contains actually the economy. That contains the growth. So there's meddling. There's meddling when it comes to there's interference, and that's actually what the West is claiming that China is doing, the debt trap. It's actually what the West is doing, because China is actually doing. There's no string attached, except that those projects need to be viable. And so there's also one thing which is really important, is that when you see all those news that are extremely negative about China on the Belt and Road Initiative, or One Belt, One Road, you need to understand that the US has a budget of $500 million per year to do negative coverage about the Belt and Road Initiative. So just imagine this strategy of a loser. Why would you need, let's say you are into competition, you do running, but because your opponent is better than you, you need to actually pay some people to talk bad about your competitor. That's how loser is the strategy. I'm going to give you one case that actually people, most of the detractors, people that don't like, that are actually claiming that China does the debt trap, is the port. There's a port in Sri Lanka, and that's a very good example. Sri Lanka went to China and said, well, we have this project of a port. Can you actually lend me some money? Can you help me doing this port? And China said yes, because it was viable, it was critical for Sri Lanka. But then Sri Lanka had lots of debt. Actually, 90% of Sri Lanka's debt comes from the IMF, the World Bank, and other Western institutions. China is only between 6 and 10%, so it's very marginal. They did the whole project. China lent the money. But then Sri Lanka had some debt that was about to that needed to be repaid, but that didn't have money. Sri Lanka has a huge trade deficit, doesn't have enough US dollar because it needs to import, or especially oil. And Sri Lanka went to China and said, "Can you lend me money?" Sri Lanka said, "How about we do like this? The port we built, you build for us. I'm going to give it to you as leasing for hundreds of years. And then against a lump sum that I will be able to use to pay the IMF." You see, China didn't do, it's not linked directly to the project of the port. It is linked to another debt trap, the real debt trap from the IMF, short-term, high interest rates that was about to be due. That's one of the examples. So very often you say, oh, you see debt trap. China did the port, and actually there was a debt. Sri Lanka didn't pay, and China grabbed the asset. So that's one of the examples. The problem is that, see, most of the people, they don't do the homework. So I saw that news. I needed to do the whole homework. It took me, 1-2 hours. And then I came up with the answer. The problem is that people are, they don't do the homework. And that's how the system works. They just want you to understand some oversimplifications. Now I am going to give you, I'm going to actually check your comments. Please shoot questions. Do you know the work of Dan Cohen regarding how Zionists think? Yeah, absolutely. Dan Cohen, he did a very interesting documentary with Max Blumenthal. The name is Killing Gaza. And I advise you guys just to watch that. Additional to that, I mentioned this yesterday, you want to understand about history. A very, very good book that I read 25 years ago is Dominique Lapierre, very well documented. And the name is O Jerusalem. It depends on how insane the generals are in the IDF. Well, if you listen, actually, the good thing with the Zionists is that they say clearly what they want to do. The extreme, it's extremely racist project, but they say exactly what they want to do. And they in their interviews, they call Palestinians animals or beasts. So that's dehumanizing people. But it's not much different from what the Nazis were doing with the Jews. It's interesting. Interesting, sad. It's just think for a second. The Holocaust survivors, if they only knew about the Zionist project, how it turned out. You have a whole nation that actually came out because of the Holocaust and because of their sufferings. And what they did was to do a concentration camp, which is far, far bigger. And they made suffer slow. They gave a slow death to the Palestinians. 2 million people in a prison. I just wonder how those people, Holocaust survivors, would think. What the fuck did we do? How did it get to this situation? I don't know. It's crazy. What a time to be alive. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Please shoot questions. Yeah, Hebrew was resurrected as a spoken languages in 1930s. Absolutely. The The Ashkenazi, they come from the Khazar Empire. The Khazar Empire is that region between Poland, Russia, Ukraine, and they were pagans, they were converted Jews, and their language was Yiddish. Yiddish is something which sounds very much similar to German. But again, we need to be careful. Once you start talking about this Khazar Empire, people start talking about anti-Semitism, which I just don't care. But it's just important just to know that history. And as I mentioned the other day, there's a very good book, Professor Shlomo San from Tel Aviv University, The Invention of the Jewish Nation. But it's not my focus. It's just even people tell me I'm anti-Semite, I would say, I don't even have time to be anti-Semite. Sorry. It's a luxury to have that time. I'm busy I'm busy with my life, like all of us, right? But also I think there's a more important fight. This is a minor thing, in actually, if people really cared about Jews, they would actually be anti-Zionist. It's a self-destruction project. If you care about Jews, you and actually, I do think that even Iran cares more about Jews. People. Did you know that one of the largest Jewish communities in Iran actually, and it is anti-Zionist, because there's actually at the beginning of the creation of Israel, most people, Jews that were practicing the religion, because many Jews don't practice the religion, they were against the project, because in the Torah you were not supposed to go back to Israel. Will the global South unite? It has to. I hope so. But you see, as I mentioned yesterday, the whole creation of Israel, at the beginning, they wanted to have a foreign entity. Around 1907, they wanted to do a foreign entity because they saw the Arab nation was actually very powerful and very united, just because there was a single language. Just think about it, single language with the natural resources. Think about how powerful would have been the Arab nation. So it was dangerous. So that's why they put Israel. They didn't care. Actually, Jews was a way to unite people and actually indoctrinate people. You see, but because you need indoctrination, the same as is in Ukraine. They had to indoctrinate people into believing to something strong, so they would actually be willing to die for. In Ukraine, they say, well, Nazi ideology, and we have Ukrainian is a race, which is not. It's not. Ukrainian is part of it's Slavic. The only difference maybe with Ukrainians that they are more like especially in the West, they might be closer to Western Europe, maybe, but not even. Why does Russia allow Israel to bomb Syria? No way, it doesn't. Oh well, it's a fine line. It's very difficult. I think there are gray lines, but there are limits that Israel cannot cross. And so this is why you have Russian presence there. And I think they have some, we call it modus vivendi, I think, a way to live together somehow, where this area for now, you just, you don't go in that area. You're pumping the guy oil in that area. That's okay. We close an eye on this, but there are limits into what Israel can do in Syria. They wouldn't bomb Russians in Syria, but there are limits to what they can do. And actually, how Israel is operating inside Syria is through ISIS. How inconvenient! Just think about it. You even have ISIS wounded soldiers I mean, those are the most radical. They are much more radicals than Hamas. Some of them have been treated in Israel. Just think about this. So Israel, they provide support, and also they're helping ISIS, and randomly they bomb Syria. But that's part of the project of a greater Israel. Uh, yeah, USA created ISIS. Well, the same. USA created ISIS, created Al Qaeda. But you see, those are monsters that actually will backfire into the face of the collective West. We've seen it before. Al Qaeda became a monster, and then you have different branches now: Al Nusra, ISIS, and we will have the same when it comes to the Nazi ideology that actually we created in Ukraine. And actually, well, even Zelensky said, well, the day that you will not help me, maybe those people will get angry, and this might turn against Europe. Angelo, why does Iraq allow US troops base in their country? What? Because they are stronger. They can't fight back. But actually, it's illegal. U.S. occupation. The parliament, Iraqi parliament, voted at unanimity to have U.S. to leave Iraq. Unanimity. So you see, the U.S. imposed democracy in Iraq. There were elections, so you have an elected government in Iraq, and this government voted again for the U.S. to leave Iraq at the unanimity, and the U.S. is still staying there. So why are they staying there? Well, because they're stronger. They have the weapon. Iraqi don't have a say for now. But actually, last night they bombed the U.S. Army base, and I think what we'll be seeing in the next few days is actually you will have people actually targeting U.S. interest. It could be U.S. Army bases, or it could be embassies, consulates. You mentioned the book "Oh Jerusalem." I have it in my library. I will read it again. Actually, and I will do it again too. It's important just to go back to those good books. Why did U.S. assassinate Iranian General Soleimani? Well, because he was a symbol. He was a symbol. He was one of the most respected person in the whole Middle East, and especially in Iran. So I think we are close to 40 minutes. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, I try to do this again pretty much every day. I might do a live show either tonight or tomorrow with Brian Beletic on the new Atlas. Please like and share. If you can support me through I put a link, buy me a coffee or Patreon. If you can't, just share the videos and just be safe. Be safe. Ultimately, what we are doing here is trying to spread the word. If we can be driven by ideology, but we need to try to stay cool and stay cool-headed. And ultimately, it's tough when you have injustice. It is very difficult, but ultimately, if this can contribute to peace, because I think we need to enter into a more rational world, a world of adults where you don't have senile people like Biden or just irrational collective West leaders. Anyway, just stay safe. So I mentioned just Norman Finkelstein. Try to Google some videos that he did recently. Very inspiring about this, how the perceptions of Hamas that I'm actually just reviewing. Again, sometimes all ideas are not set. We need to challenge And history will tell, actually. History will tell us if Hamas did it right, you know. It will tell us. We just don't know. We just don't know. Uh, if Gaza ceased to exist and is wiped out and is taken by Israel, then Hamas might be was part of the problem, you know, and was a tool. You can't tell. You can tell. If it wins, then you can say, well, Hamas did right. Anyway, you stay safe. Thanks for your support, and until next time. Bye bye.